Welcome to the Working Genius podcast, where we discuss anything and everything related to the 6 types of working genius and how it impacts your work and your life. I'm Pat Lencioni, and I'll be your host today. I'm joined by the 3 people who helped me develop this tool. That includes Tracy Noble. Hi, Tracy.
Hi, Pat.
Cody Thompson. Hello, Cody.
Hello.
And Matthew Lencioni. Hey, Matt.
Hi there.
Matt happens to have the same last name that I do, but it's not related to me as far as I know.
He'd like that. No, I'm just kidding.
Of course he is. Matt's my son. Today, in one of our first episodes, we're going to be talking about something that we call, are you a disruptor or a responder? What does that mean, Cody?
Well, what we're talking about is that there are 3 of the working geniuses that fall into a category that are more responsive, meaning that they respond to either another genius or something in the environment. So they're more reactive in their genius.
Yeah, we almost called it passive at one point.
And they're receiving things. And so the other 3, which are on the bottom, if you were to draw a horizontal line across.
It goes WIDGET, but the W, the D, and the E all go across the top. Those are the 3 responsive geniuses.
Right. And then the 3 below, the I, the inventor, the galvanizer, and the tenacity genius, all are disruptive.
Right.
And that means that they enforce their will or their genius out into the world. You know, like they're disruptive, actually performing that task.
Yeah, neither are better or worse than another, but one actually provokes change, the other responds to the provocation of change.
And what's interesting about this is that I've actually helped people identify what is my working genius when they have a tie or they're unsure. And just last week, I was working with a team where someone found out this classification and it helped her realize, oh, I'm more of a responder to things. I wait for people to influence me. When you're having a conversation and trying to figure out, do I have the genius of enablement? An easy way to figure that out is like, am I more responsive? Do I tend to respond to the galvanizer? Or am I someone that has part of my genius and part of what I love and get fulfilled by is out there like disrupting?
Right. Matt, Matt, you had some pretty interesting things. You know, I've known you for 22 years, almost 23 now, but until we did this tool, I didn't really understand how this impacted you.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm a discerner enabler, and then my first working competency is wonder. So my top 3 geniuses are all responsive.
Which means you're going to let somebody else initiate when it comes to work.
Yeah.
Rather than provoking them or pushing them to get things started.
Yeah, doing the provoking or pushing is difficult for me. And it makes it so much easier for me when someone asks something of me so I can use enablement, or someone asks me to evaluate something so I can use discernment. But
and this
the
is
opposite
huge
is tough.
for me as your dad and a coworker. Sometimes I would be like, how come you're not getting this started?
Not proactive, yeah.
Right. And then every time we'd ask him, he'd always have an answer. He'd be ready to go. But he would be like, I wait for somebody else to initiate.
Yeah, even in conversation, I'll listen and I'll take it in. And then when somebody asks me something, I'll have an answer, but I don't insert myself into things. And
I think our listeners will see this play out in this podcast because Matt and I are both responders. We're responsive. I am an E and a D. So you'll find us not talking as much as maybe you and Cody.
Yeah, and Cody and I, we do the At the Table podcast, and you guys are involved in that. And like our wives will say, hey, how come you don't let Tracy or Amy talk more?
Exactly.
It's like, we want them to,
Totally.
But we have to ask.
That's right. Exactly.
And what a great thing to understand about somebody.
Well, and I'll say this, like as someone who works and manages Matt to some degree on our team, before we had this language, it was almost frustrating when I would be like, it would be so funny, Matt, where I would say like, hey, are you owning this thing that is under your care, you know, like under your area? And you would pull up like 3 pages of notes and ideas and stuff. And I'm like, oh, wow. Why don't you ever tell me about that stuff? And it speaks to it does speak to like the model in general, where we make these unnecessary judgments and or even have guilt ourselves around these things. Knowing whether you're going to be more responsive is so helpful, because now I realize, hey, if you throw things at him all day, he will take them and he executes on it. He gets them done, you know?
Right.
And I have to be the one that pulls it out of him, and that's okay. If I didn't know that, you can make all sorts of judgments.
That's right. Now, Cody, you are a DG, but your G is because it's disruptive, it comes across very loud and clear.
And it's funny because we sit, Tracy, Matt, and I share a desk, a little pod of desks here. And almost all the time, whenever it's too quiet, I'll just go, "Hey guys, what are you working on?" And it feels weird, but I'm like, "Oh, I don't know what's going on." And they'll sit there all day and crank on stuff and discern and, enable things to happen. And but I have to be the one that goes, "Hey, let me interrupt, close your laptops." And it's very disruptive to galvanize and go, "Are we talking about the right things?" We did that just before we came in here.
Absolutely. And you asked me the other day, does that bother you? Do you think that I'm checking in on you? And it doesn't bother me at all. In fact, I welcome it. I love it when you ask me what I'm doing because I want to tell people. I just don't know how necessarily.
Definitely. Yeah, same way.
It doesn't bother you.
No, I love when people ask me because then I have something to respond to. Then I don't have to be disruptive.
How about if your dad asks you?
A little different.
A little different.
Well, and think about this. The relationship too is that you guys are both enabler. You have enablement as your
Tracy
working
and Matt.
genius. Yeah. And so that is perfectly complementary to my G, my galvanizing. So you guys respond to that. I don't know that would always be true. I think sometimes, like if I go to you, Pat, and say, "Hey, what are you working on?" It's not necessarily received the same way.
Well, no, actually, it would lead to 90 minutes of conversations between the two of us because we're both like that. I think that it's worthwhile to go through these and explain what we mean. Like a wanderer, a person with the wonder, they're looking at their environment. And my wife is one, Amy's one. They just sit and respond to what they see around them. And they can sit for so long and just respond to what the environment gives them and ask questions about that. The inventor says, "I am going to come up with a new idea and bring it to the world.
Yep.
I'm going to provoke change. Here's a better way." So that's how an inventor is disruptive. They might be quiet, but they're like saying, "No, I want the world to change according to this new idea," rather than just respond to what I'm seeing.
Well, and what's interesting about that is because you're totally right. In some ways, the inventor is responding to the wonder question, but the thing that makes it nuanced and different is a wonderer will literally just ask the question and that's enough. It's like, Amy, who's a wonderer, she'll throw out what we used to think were yellow flags. And now that we know she's a wonderer, we're like, is that one yellow or is that red?
Right.
But she'll just ask a question and she's totally okay with just having asked the question.
Yep.
There's no, let me solve that. And that's what the inventor does. They go, "Oh, I'm going to make something real. I'm going to disrupt the status quo.
I'm going to make change happen."
Exactly.
Right. Now, the discerner that comes after the inventor, they're responding to what? The idea of the inventor.
Right.
And they
evaluate.
They evaluate it. And they're saying, since you brought this idea about, I will then respond by providing you my input, my assessment, my feedback.
Yeah. And I think anyone who's listening to this and going like, where do I fall on this? I'm as a discerner, one of my favorite things, you guys did this to me the other day. I was on a phone call and you had written some stuff on the board. I came out of the room and you were like, "Hey, Cody, come over here. We want you to help us figure out what you think is right here." And I was like, oh boy, that sounds wonderful. So I'm responding to the invention, like what is on the board? Let me evaluate it.
What's fascinating about this? So Tracy, you're my editor for my books. So I love coming up with new characters and ideas. Tracy responds and has these amazing insights. She thinks, I don't know how I would come up with this, but she gets it, grasps it, and gives me the best feedback and understanding of that. And I remember the days when we came up with this model, sitting downstairs over there across the street, and Matthew and Tracy sitting there and saying, "You come up with the questions. We will tell you if they're good or not.
Mm-hmm.
You do the I, and we'll do the D."
Yep.
And it was so amazing of a process because they loved responding to my ideas. And I loved being able to put things out there and getting immediate feedback.
Oh my gosh, that was so much fun. My favorite time of year is when we're coming up with new products and when you're writing a book, because I love taking your ideas and tweaking them and talking about them with you. And it's my favorite time with you. And that's the whole ID dynamic.
Exactly. The ID and go together. It's the disruptor getting feedback from the responder. Matt, you were in your first month of work with us when we did this. And we had no idea that we were going to be doing this. Do you remember, what was it like being downstairs going through those questions?
It was great. It worked your eye, and then I got the chance to respond with discernment. And I mean, even further than that, Cody, G's, Tracy and I, E, and then whatever happens with T happens.
So that's
we
what
make Tracy do it.
we push that onto
That's
Tracy.
my third.
Which let's move beyond the D now. And then comes the galvanizer. This is very disruptive because they're the one that says, come on, you guys, we need to do this. Everybody stop working. Listen here. We've got to rally. So they're disrupting the environment. In fact, they're the chief disruptive officer, I think.
Mm-hmm.
They're saying we need to change and respond to and do this. And it's the E, which Matthew, you and Tracy both have, the enablement person who responds to that and says, I will do whatever you need me to do. So again, the disruptor and the responder need each other. And it's a crazy how it goes throughout the process of responsive, disruptive, responsive, disruptive, responsive. And then the final disruptor is the T, the person with tenacity.
Right. And that sort of disruption looks slightly different. And that is the person that it's not galvanizing. It's we're going to hold you accountable to finish this.
And we're going to blow through obstacles.
Yeah. And we, I have friends. In fact, I have a friend in high school who, looking back literally 15 years, I'm like, oh, she was a T. I didn't have the language for this, but she was the one that every day was like, did you do your homework? Did you do it? Or did you study for the test? And she was just like wanting to make sure and knowing that I had a natural deficiency, or looking back and realizing that her sort of disruption was totally against the grain for me. And she just brought it to the forefront all the time. You got to finish this. And so the T is really unique in that they impose their will on the project in terms of finishing it to see the impact in the world. So you see they won't let it go until they see the results.
Right. And so if you have a child or an employee or a spouse that is mostly disruptive, like Matt has one, it's so helpful to say, just so you know, it's not an excuse that, okay, sometimes you shouldn't do that, but naturally, I am not going to be disrupting things. I'm going to wait and respond to what you guys bring to us. And so it's such a helpful thing to understand. And my wife is totally responsive. And there were times when I was like, how come you're not? And now we talk about it at the house. She's like, I don't know how to get these kids to do their chores. You need to do it. Totally. Because I can disrupt a little bit more. And that's not in a bad way, but it's in a good way.
Well, and it's worth noting that there's no, there's no value or in any of these. It's just knowing about yourself. We have two people on the team here Matt and Tracy, you both have responsive geniuses, and you and I each share half and half. And I know I can feel in my own work where I'm doing the evaluating and receiving ideas and responding to them, versus when I have to get the disruptor on and go out and rally the troops around the idea,
Well, this is where the guilt and judgment comes into. I feel guilty for disrupting, and you guys feel guilty for responding, for not disrupting. And people go through life thinking, how come I'm not better at that? It's like, because that's not the gift God gave you.
Totally.
And so now this team works really well because you guys are like, come on, invent something. And we're like, discern something. You're like, galvanize us. We're like, enable. And it gets things done.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of this, right? Like, this is what when we finished with this model, one of the things we sat around the table and said is, this means that we need each other.
Yep.
There's no like, hey, what's the best type? It's like, no, if we don't have all these, we can't get this done. And this model is a testament. The speed to which we got it out in the world, the efficacy of it is a testament to the model itself. We used some wonder to provoke the question.
Yep, that was Amy.
You used your invention to come up with the idea. We used our collective discernment to refine it. We galvanized it, got it out in the world, and enabled it and got it off the ground, and then finished it.
Right.
And so I just think, like you said, it's not about, should disruptors be more responsive? Should they wait? No, just be whoever you are. Right. And embrace that and know that you can tap into your team members.
Cody, you were just telling me a story today about you started a company and all four of you were galvanizers.
Yeah, well, I didn't know when we started the company. Otherwise, I would have fired myself and one other. But yeah, I just had this revelation last week when I met up with one of the co-founders who's still running it. And I was like, oh my gosh, I had done every personality assessment you could think of to try to help our team. Because I did Myers-Briggs, I did, working styles, all of that. And it finally occurred to me in a conversation I had this week, we were all galvanizers. Which is all disruptive.
Yeah. Y'all wanted to change the world, get everybody doing something.
And it was like going to a debate meet. Every meeting was, how can I exert my galvanizing stronger than the other members?
And no enablement.
No enablement. We had great, really passionate arguments and then got very little done.
Okay, Cody, so let me ask you this. Now that you have language around this, what would you have done differently?
Well, sir, I think it was a uniquely like similar team in the sense that I would bet that E and T were in almost all of our working frustrations. And so we would have had to outsource hire right away, like way earlier than we thought to make that meaningful. And we would have, if we had language, I think what we tried to do is discern by way of galvanizing, like who can convince other people the best. And what we needed to do is rely on discernment in order to know what to galvanize. And we unfortunately did not do that. And
I like to think about it like if you were in a band and all 4 people in the band wanted to be the lead singer and write the songs.
Yeah.
You need, some of them are just like, no, dude, you write the songs. I'll play whatever, tell me the key and everything else. I just love cranking on this stuff, or I'll support this stuff. And that's how bands break up. That's how teams don't work, because everybody wants to be the captain. Everybody wants to call the plays. And we can't have that in a work team. And that's the beauty of all this.
Yeah, you need people who are responsive. You need people who are disruptive. You need people with every genius. Otherwise, you can't get stuff done.
That's right. All right. Well, I hope that's helpful and interesting. Was it interesting and helpful for you, Matt?
Yep.
Always got to ask questions. Well, let us know if you have any insights about this. We love it. Send us email at, where should they send it, Matt?
Podcast@tablegroup.com.
That sounds great. Podcast@tablegroup.com. And we hope you'll tell your friends that like the Working Genius model to join us on our next episode of the Working Genius podcast. Thanks for joining us, everybody. God bless.